You ever have one of those mornings where you just know before you've even finished your coffee that trouble's headed straight for you with your name on it? Yeah, that was me staring out at my snow-covered driveway when I spotted Brenda's shadow stretching all the way from her house to mine like some kind of suburban omen. The way the sunlight caught her hair, she looked like she was auditioning for the role of HOA villain in some low-budget movie, except, this was my life. I was on my second cup debating whether to actually shovel the walkway or just let the sun do its thing when Brenda Patterson, clipboard in hand expression carved out of stone, came marching across the property line. Daniel Crawford, she called loud enough to make a crow take off from the power line. We need to discuss this eyesore immediately. Eyesore. I looked around, half expecting a flaming tire in the front yard, but no, she was pointing at the snow pile out back. 8 feet tall, 15 feet wide, product of 3 January blizzards, and my aching back. She was the new president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, elected by a whopping 3-vote margin last November. And honestly, she'd been making my life interesting ever since, treating the bylaws like they were the 10 Commandments, except with more pettiness and fewer miracles. Section 7, Paragraph 4. Daniel, she said, waving her clipboard like a sword. Excessive snow accumulation must be dispersed within 10 days of the last snowfall. I blinked at her, still holding my coffee mug. Are you serious? I never joke about community standards, she said deadpan. She had the document highlighted passages and all ready to shove in my face. Apparently, I'd been warned already. This was my final notice. $100 a day fines were on the table. And if I didn't comply, she could put a lien on my house. Over snow. In Vermont. In February. Now, I'd like to say I handled it with grace, but my brain just snapped to, "Lady, where do you expect me to put it? Load it in the back of my truck and drive it to Canada." Didn't matter. Brenda's face was all business. That's not my concern. The bylaws exist for a reason. My neighbors' houses disappeared behind that growing mound all month, but nobody cared except Brenda. I tried to reason with her, point out that come March, the sun would take care of it. 4 weeks, she shot back. 10-day forecast shows below freezing temps. That pile isn't going anywhere. I took a deep breath, biting down every sarcastic response. You want me to remove several tons of snow that's hurting nobody? I didn't invent the rule, she said, pushing the paper at me. Just enforcing it. Honestly, what she had was one of those vague catch-all clauses. Excessive accumulation of natural materials could mean snow leaves, dust, stray thoughts. But Brenda saw only what she wanted a chance to assert her authority. Fine starts today, she said, jotting a note. $100 per day. Have a good day, Mr. Crawford. She spun on her heel and marched off, leaving boot prints and a trail of indignation. Standing there on my porch, I tried to process what just happened. This was nuts even by HOA standards, so I called Marcus Chin, my neighbor and local expert on Meadowbrook drama. He'd been here 15 years and seen it all. Let me guess. He said when he picked up Brenda, found a new target. I told him about the snow pile. Marcus whistled. Last month she tried to find the Hendersons for Christmas lights, wrong shade of white. They took them down. Not worth the headache. Brenda's got the board wrapped around her finger. He offered the kind of advice that comes from experience. Spread the snow around, make it look like you're trying, wait for her to get bored. But honestly, my stubbornness had already taken over. It's the principle, I told him. I can't just give in to this kind of bullying. He laughed but promised to back me up. Sarah, my wife, home with her laptop and legal files, overheard the commotion. Let's just deal with it, she said, practical as ever. It's not worth the money or the fight. But that wasn't it. If I rolled over now, Brenda would come for the grass next, or the color of our mailbox. She already had a reputation for ruler measuring lawns and counting cars. Sarah made me promise to be smart, though. Check the bylaws, talk to a lawyer if needed. Don't end up losing the house over a snow pile. So I dug into the PDF bylaws, which looked like they'd been photocopied back in the Reagan era and scanned at the lowest possible resolution. The excessive accumulation clause was vague, no definitions, just room for interpretation. But then buried in Section 12, Paragraph 8, I found something. Any enforcement action by the HOA had to be reasonable and applied uniformly across all properties. Plus, owners could appeal fines to the full board before they took effect. Now we're talking. I wrote my appeal that afternoon, citing everything I'd found. took photos of 4 other properties with even bigger snow piles, including one way closer to the street. I emailed it to the board, copying everyone, including Brenda. Didn't take long for the response. That evening, Gerald Hopkins, a board member and retired accountant, called me. "We're having an emergency meeting tomorrow about your appeal, Daniel." "Emergency? Over a snow pile? Brenda says you're being defiant," he said, and setting a bad example. I asked if he'd ever seen anyone fined for snow in his decades here. "No," he admitted. "But Brenda's got Linda and Tom siding with her. I'm outnumbered." The 5th member, Janet, was out on medical leave. So next evening, Sarah and I walked into the community center, nervous but determined. The board sat at a folding table like a tribunal. Brenda presided in the middle, Linda and Tom flanking her, Gerald at the end, looking apologetic. About a dozen neighbors sat in metal chairs, eager for drama. Brenda rapped her gavel. "We're here to address a violation issued to Daniel Crawford for excessive snow accumulation." I made my case. Respectful, measured photos, bylaw citations, the works. Explained that my pile was neither excessive nor a nuisance, not visible from the street, not harming anyone. Pointed out the vague language and inconsistent enforcement. Brenda didn't flinch. "Thank you for your input, but your pile is visible from the Johnson's property and near the line, creating drainage issues when it melts." I tried to push back, explained the land sloped away. It wasn't a problem. She insisted. 8 feet is excessive by any standard," she said, voice rising. "What's excessive?" I countered. "The bylaws don't say." At one point I asked who'd even reported it. "That's confidential," she snapped. Gerald spoke up cautiously. "I think Daniel makes some valid points. Maybe we should clarify our guidelines." Linda, to her credit, agreed the fine seemed steep. Maybe it should be reduced while I worked on it. Brenda insisted the amount was fixed to ensure prompt compliance. They voted. Brenda, Linda, and Tom in favor, Gerald against. 3-1 fines upheld. $200 owed starting 2 days ago, plus $100 each day after. "This isn't over," I said quietly, and Brenda shot back. "It will be when you comply." In the parking lot, a few neighbors offered words of support. "You should talk to Jim Fowler," one said. "He's a lawyer, knows this stuff." The next morning, I called Jim. When he heard about the violation, he actually laughed. "Never heard of an HOA fining over snow in Vermont," he said. "Honestly, Daniel fighting it will cost more than just paying or moving the snow. HOAs have broad authority even if it's dumb." That got me thinking. Was it worth it, Sarah thought? Maybe we should just hire someone to haul the snow. But then, twist of fate, 3 days after the meeting, another snowstorm hit. Not as big as before, but it added 8 more inches to the pile. Out of spite, I added it all to the existing mound. That's when Marcus jogged over, looking frazzled. "Have you seen Brenda this morning?" he asked. "Her basement's flooding. Water pouring out the window. Her husband's hauling boxes from the cellar." I felt a flash of sympathy, but also, well, I'm not proud curiosity. I checked my own basement, bone dry, sump pump humming away. Over the next few days, word spread. Brenda's basement was a disaster. Water remediation crews furnace shot insurance nightmares. Then I got a call from a number I didn't know. Daniel Crawford. "Yes, who's this? Ray Donovan, Superior Septic Services. We're working on a flooding issue for your neighbor Brenda Patterson. Her septic tank and drain field, well, according to the county, it should be right in the back corner, but we can't find it. She thinks you might have buried it. She says there's a massive pile on your property near the line." Suddenly it all made sense. The snow pile right where her septic tank was supposed to be. "Yeah, I've got a pile. 8 feet tall, 15 wide, about 5 feet off the property line." Ray whistled. "That'd do it. If the tank's under there, ground's frozen, full tank can't drain, could cause a backup." Vindication with a side of concern. Ray asked for permission to excavate. "Do what you need to do," I said. "Just let me know what you find." I called Sarah at work. "You won't believe this. Brenda's septic tank is under the snow pile. That's why her basement's flooding." Sarah just said, "That's karma. Literal karma." Ray's crew showed up with an excavator. Didn't take long. Right under the heaviest part of the snow pile, they found the tank lid. Brenda stormed over, decked out in designer jeans and a puffy jacket. "Why are you digging on his property?" she demanded. Ray explained, patient as a kindergarten teacher. "Ma'am, your tank's here." The snow pile created a cap. Tank filled up, couldn't drain, started backing up into your house. Brenda's face went through several shades of red. But she pointed at me. He refused to move it. Did you know it was there? I said. Because I sure didn't, Ray shrugged. Look, I just fix things. The bad news is, you're looking at 5 to 8 grand in repairs. Brenda looked like she might faint. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Repairs went on for days, snow pile spread out, tank pumped pipes replaced. The neighborhood watched like it was free cable. Marcus stood next to me grinning. Best thing to happen around here in years. Should have called it Mount Karma from the start. We laughed a little too hard. But it wasn't over. 4 days later, Sarah called me at work, her voice tight. Brenda's here with the police. I rushed home. Brenda, voice shaking, accused me of deliberately damaging her septic system, claimed I was harassing her. The officers, patient, skeptical, asked their questions. Did you know about the septic tank? No, sir. Did you receive notice? Only about snow, not septic. Eventually, the sergeant sighed. This is a civil matter, ma'am, not criminal. We're done here. That night, Sarah worried Brenda might sue. Jim Fowler thought it was a long shot. She'd have to prove I knew, which even she didn't. But about the fines, if the snow was removed for emergency repairs, they can't reasonably enforce them, Jim said. So, I drafted another letter to the board laying out everything. The repairs, the emergency, the property line, weirdness. Demanded a response. Gerald called me personally a couple days later. Janet's back from medical leave. Not happy with how things have gone. We voted fines, dropped bylaw up for revision. Brenda's on thin ice. Suddenly the tide had turned. But Brenda wasn't finished. She hired a survey crew, orange stakes, flags, the works. Claimed the snow pile was on her property. Survey said otherwise, 5.5 feet on my side. But here's the kicker. The survey also showed her septic tank, or at least part of it, encroached onto my land. Unpermitted, a violation from back in '88. Jim Fowler just smiled. Leverage. So I drafted an offer. I'd grant a permanent easement for the tank if Brenda backed off all further complaints and stopped harassing neighbors through the HOA. In writing. She balked, but her husband Doug quietly told her, just take the deal. She signed the resignation, signed the easement, and the neighborhood exhaled for the first time in months. Janet became president, common sense returned, and the snow pile that started it all faded into legend. Brenda, though, she didn't let it go. 2 months later, she sued me claiming extortion over the tank. Jim handled it like a pro. The judge threw it out and Brenda got stuck paying my legal fees. 5 grand plus sanctions. Karma again. Life settled down. The neighborhood thawed along with the snow. Janet revised the bylaws. Snow piles now fine unless blocking something real. At the next HOA meeting, Gerald proposed an amendment to clarify the rules and everyone laughed, remembering the Great Snow Pile War. Even Brenda showed up quieter, working in her garden, keeping to herself. The lesson hit me on a cold February night, clearing my driveway, talking with Marcus. Know where your septic tank is before starting a fight, he said. We both cracked up. But really what I learned is this. Sometimes you have to stand up to nonsense even when it's a hassle. Sometimes you have to fight for common sense because if you don't, nobody else will. Over time, Brenda moved to Florida. The new owners were great. I told them where the tank was, left out the drama. Life moved on. Every winter when I see the snow falling, I remember that absurd battle and I smile. Because out here, sometimes the smallest things, a pile of snow, a clipboard, a stubborn neighbor, reveal the biggest truths about power, fairness, and what it takes to make a real community. So here's my question. Where's the line between maintaining standards and wielding authority just for the thrill of it? Ever had a run-in with HOA rules or a neighbor who just had to win? I'd love to hear your stories, your close calls, your own brushes with neighborhood justice. Let's see who's got the best Mount Karma moment, because I can promise you you're not alone.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.